Hi and welcome to the Experience Depot. My name is Dania Denise Mallete and I am an entrepreneur, chalk artist, model, actor, coach, mentor, consultant, and an indie filmmaker. My experience working in the corporate world was shortly after graduating from college in 2005. I took on a job in Sacramento as a writer and editor for a skincare website, and I was super excited to use my minor in journalism and make a difference. The novelty wore off after about a month. It was really quick for me to realize the corporate world was just so different. Small things were so petty and they became big office dramas. You had micromanaging. I just felt like I couldn't be myself. And I spent a little over a year, almost 2 years, before I got laid off. Then I, for some reason, went deeper into the heart of corporate, and I worked in Silicon Valley. And I worked as a search engine marketing administrator, which is just fancy for learning to write content and working with the search engines for an education portal. It's fascinating, I know, but I found myself in the same situation. Different company, but same territory, same petty squabbles. They really frowned upon if you had other outside interests other than just doing what they wanted you to do. And I had a supervisor who unfortunately did not really respect women that much in the workplace. We butted heads, he made me cry, he verbally harassed me when I made a mistake. I knew that he had done the same to other women. His wife was the head of HR. Can't complain about your boss to the boss's wife. So I found myself again getting laid off, and this time I just leaned into it, and I couldn't have been more thrilled to get out of that environment. It works for some people, it just didn't work for me. I became the Chalk Chica by happy accident. I had already been doing my art business for about a year, and I answered a Craigslist ad looking for a chalk muralist. And I, first of all, had never heard of such a title, but I knew I did murals, and if I could paint and do illustrations, then I could probably draw with chalk. So I didn't know the name of the company, and I showed up in San Francisco, and it turned out to be for Zynga, which is the huge mobile gaming giant. And it was right at the time when they were exploding and becoming super popular. So they were actually moving from one building to their now headquarters, which is huge. I interviewed, did really well, got the job, and I proceeded to work with them as my main client for 5 years. And it gave me a chance to really experience what it was like to work with chalk, and I fell in love with it. It was so fun. It came easy to me. And when I started documenting with time-lapse videos and photos and growing my portfolio online, as soon as people saw that I did chalk, suddenly they were just blowing up my phone and my email. I've got a wedding, I have a baby shower, I've got a restaurant, a trade show. I mean, people were using chalk to express their creativity in so many ways that I honestly never thought of. So I realized, I think I found a niche here, there's a demand. Well, who else is doing this? So I used my corporate experience, and I knew how the search engines worked and how keywords worked, and nobody was marketing themselves quite the way that I had in mind of doing it. I knew I didn't want to really do murals and illustrations anymore. I wanted to just invest in myself and do chalk. And so I created the Chalk Chica. And to this day, you couldn't have told me back then that it would have taken off the way it had. And I'm so thankful that it did. What happened to my chalk art business when the pandemic hit was like everybody else. It was absolutely gutted. I mean, I was getting cancellation emails and phone calls left and right. I've had more apologies in a short amount of time than I've had my entire life. I couldn't blame them. No one could work. Nobody knew what was happening. The world was ending as far as we were concerned. And I have chalkboards at my house that I was working on for clients, and the fear was so just unprecedented at the time that I actually had those clients say, well, we don't know how the contamination of this virus works, and we're concerned about you even sending chalkboards to our warehouses. We don't want to jeopardize our employees. So can you hold on to them for us, and we'll just kind of get back to you in like whenever this blows over. And we thought it was going to be a couple months. So I had no work. My job as an entrepreneur and an artist was recession-proof, but it was not pandemic-proof, and that was really devastating for me. It took me a minute to actually garner the strength that I needed to pull the trigger on the other passions and endeavors I wanted to pursue. Yes, I was given the gift of time. I was at home and doing the whole quarantine life like everybody else with the shelter in place, but I mourned the loss of my business at that time, in the sense of it had brought me such financial stability and security that I never thought. You hear the term struggling artist and it's a real thing. And I I couldn't help but reflect on the times when I would work on installations in public, you know, the live demonstrations, and I would have people come up to me and say, is this what you do full time? And I'd say, yeah, I do chalk full time. And they said, but do you pay bills with it? And I was like, oh yeah, bills and more. And a couple of them said, well, I have a kid and they're pretty artistic, and I was worried because I don't think artists really make money. And so it gave me a teaching moment to tell those parents, encourage your child to pursue art in whatever form, but tell them they have to know business. You have to be a business person. You don't have to go to school for business, but understand what it's like to market yourself. You can be as free and artistic as you want, but if people don't understand your brand, if you don't know what services you want to provide, if you don't know what you're doing well and how to get yourself out there, you are going to be a starving artist. So I couldn't help but reflect on those moments sitting at home, now going, I worked for 70 hours, 7 days a week. And I had amassed a certain amount of financial comfort to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And it was literally wiped out. And I started from scratch. And that terrified me because that was part of my identity, was being independent, being an entrepreneur, being able to pay my own way for things, to command a rate and not blink an eye and have a client go, sure, you're worth that. So I struggled with that internally. And then after I mulled about it for a while and stayed in bed and binge watched everything on Netflix, I then got inspired because I said, well, what you'd always been complaining about for the last couple of years was, oh, it's always the chalk chica. You can't act or model really, or if you do, you always have to it's so difficult logistically. And how often have we said to ourselves, if I had the gift of time, I would do X, Y, and Z. Well, girl, now you got the gift in your lap. What are you gonna do with it? And so I just woke up one morning and I said to myself, if I don't come out of this pandemic with planting the seeds of something that's gonna pay dividends in my creative realm, I've wasted my time. And that fear of not coming through really lit the fire under my butt. And so I started writing. I got back into really getting comfortable with screenwriting. I was in touch with my agent. I was keeping ears to the wind about what was happening in the production world with my fellow creatives and what they were working on or not working on. And the stars aligned and there was a silver lining where people started to get comfortable with the protocols, people started shooting again, and I knew that this was the time to not only get back in front of the camera, that I wanted to fulfill my dream of having my own indie film production company where I was calling the shots, where I was telling the stories, where I was writing the voices that I wanted to hear as an audience. And that inspired me to just completely leave behind all the sad stuff and look forward to the tomorrow that I now had in front of me. Starting my production company was a dream come true. I had helped to co-found 2 other independent film production companies, so I cut my teeth and learned a lot. And at a certain point in time, you realize when it's ready for you to take over and really call the shots and do what you want to do and not have to worry about consulting with everybody else or worrying about someone changing their mind and leaving the company. Life happens, but when you do something on your own, you are accountable and you're responsible for the vision. And I knew that I had that in me and the timing couldn't be better. So I created Runaway Productions because I wanted to create content that was anything but run-of-the-mill. I still feel that society, as progressive as we are, as diverse as we are, we're still creating this formula of this is what it means to have a happily ever after. If you do X, Y, and Z, then this will happen and you'll be fulfilled. And so there were films and shows that I would watch and I just couldn't relate because I had personal decisions that I'd made for myself that didn't reflect that. So did that mean I don't get a happily ever after? It's bull. So I knew that I wanted to take this production company and do more with it. I wanted to tell my stories. I want to tell the stories of other creatives who are along the same lines with my brand. And I wanted to touch audiences the same way that other filmmakers and creatives have touched me. I think that's a huge privilege. I think it's amazing to have people say, that's the story I've been waiting to hear, or I really identified with this character, or I thought it was gonna go in this direction and you took me in a completely different one. So I created the website. I spent months working on the content, working on projects to create the buzz around what I was working on. So everything was very, very meticulously and strategically planned. timing is everything. I wanted to launch in January. I knew I wasn't ready, so I didn't rush it. I let everything happen the way it was supposed to, and then I launched in the spring, and it's just really gone from there, so I've never looked back. The inspiration for my feature film, You Were Just Here, is actually a love letter to my father, who I lost in 2019 to pancreatic cancer. He was diagnosed on a Friday morning, and we lost him at about 1 or 2 in the morning that Saturday, and I was not able to be there. I was at home, and that affected me profoundly. It was the worst night of my life, and as I was going through his things, I found this itinerary that he had written. He was a huge rail fan, loved trains, I mean obsessed, and it was for a train trip across the country to a lighthouse, and it was a trip I knew he'd always wanted to take. And somewhere along the way, when I started screenwriting and just creating this vault of ideas that I wanted to do, I thought to myself, what would that trip look like if I took that trip with him? I had him cremated, so I had his urn. And the idea just kind of came from there for You Were Just Here. And I remember pitching it to my creative partner. I hadn't written anything at that point. And he just looked at me and he goes, you gotta tell this story. I said, well, what are you talking about? I haven't even written it yet. Like, I don't have a screenplay. And he goes, well, let's shoot a film trailer. You gotta have a proof of concept. And at first I was like, well, I don't know. I was thinking about this other story. And he goes, I don't like to push you and I'm not telling you what to do. He's like, but just you telling this story gave me chills. He said, you gotta tell your story. And so I put my trust in him, I always have, and he became my DP, and so we collaborated, and I wrote just the script for the film trailer, which was about 6-7 pages. Boom, had my cast. I already knew I would play the lead, not because I felt like I should, you know, it wasn't about me, the story's not about me, it's actually about my father. And I thought to myself, well, if this gets sold or if it gets made into a movie, they're gonna replace me with some big name actor. So at the time, I wasn't even thinking about all that. I just knew I wanted to show what this world would look like. We created a shooting schedule. We started principal photography in January. I love that grind. I love the concept behind, we're gonna tell this story no matter what, and you don't need to have a huge budget. Would we like them? Sure, but if we don't have them, we make, you know, you get lemons, you make lemonade. So, long story longer. We shot the trailer, and during that process then I started to write the story, the actual screenplay, and it was so cathartic, and I was so inspired and moved by what I was coming up with, because yes, there's elements of the story that are from my life with my father, but it was so great to kind of give yourself the creative freedom to go, okay, well, let's do this. Sure, this didn't happen in real life, but this makes the story thrive and breathe and feel so fun at the same time, even though it's dealing with the idea of loss and finding closure. So that's how I came to the screenplay situation and the film trailer, and everything just kind of worked cohesively to create this project that I'm so in love with and that I'm so proud of and that I cannot wait to share with the world. The pandemic has devastated and rocked our realities, and I don't know if there's anything else that's going to wake us up to say, hey, life is too short. You never know what's going to happen, and you never know who around you is going to be affected or impacted. So embrace it, lean into the good and the bad times, because as long as you know you're standing on solid ground and you have people around you who are like-minded and who are encouraging and thriving themselves, you can't go wrong. And this has been a win-win for me. So I wouldn't have it any other way. I've never had it easy. I've worked for everything that I've accomplished, and that's not gonna stop. And it's just gonna get bigger and better from here, and I'm committed to that. Thank you for watching The Experience Depot. Again, I'm Dania Denise Mallete, and it has been a pleasure to share my story with you. If you're interested in learning more about my work, there's a couple ways you can find me. If you're interested in the Chalk Chica, you can find me at thechalkchica.com, also on Instagram at thechalkchica. For the acting, modeling, and entertainment stuff, you can find me at daniadenise.com, also at Dania Denise on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in my indie film production company, Runaway Mill Productions, my website is runawaymillproductions.com, on Twitter as Runaway Mill, and on Instagram and Facebook at Runaway Mill Productions. Be sure to like and share this video. Subscribe to Oz Collective Media to enjoy more of the Experience Depot episodes. The Experience Depot is a collaboration between Capitol Studio West and Oz Collective Media.